Yes, sure.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Antara, and I'm really looking forward to your questions. But before we get to your questions, let me just take you through some of the ideas I jotted down when I knew I was going to come. So I'm going to start on a funny note. I'm going to start by saying, listen, really think about whether you want to do a PhD. Okay. I'm going to start by trying to dissuade you a little bit by saying, are you sure? I'll tell you why. So, first of all, you have to really ask yourself, why am I doing a PhD? Right? Is it I want is it that I want a career in academia? Is it that if I do a PhD, then in the field that I am in, I will get better jobs? Maybe. Is it that I'm really interested in this one topic and I want to pursue it? And that's the first question you have to ask yourself. Why do I want the PhD? Okay. What the answer to that should not be, I can't think of anything better to do right now. Okay. The second question after that is, what do I want to do with my PhD? Okay. Because if I look at many of my friends who did PhD, including in very prestigious universities, not everybody is an academic. Many people have gone on to do jobs that has nothing to do with their PhD. But more importantly, many people I studied with it at undergrad who did not get anywhere close to PhD earn far more than I do today. Okay, and have like good jobs and everything. So the PhD is a very specialized thing to do if you're truly interested in research. And to be honest, what happens after the PhD? There's a big question mark. As Arvind knows very well, at the moment, Western academia is suffering a real crisis, okay, particularly in the humanities and social sciences. There are almost no jobs. And in fact, most jobs that there are in fact in India for many people. Many people, Indian people who go abroad to do PhDs are coming back to India to work, right? And I think Arvind will also testify to this last point I'm going to make, that the PhD is a very, very lonely process. Okay. You are very alone through your PhD. And I'll be honest and say that I thought of quitting many times and I applied to do many other things during my PhD. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to go work in a bank. I wanted to go become a lawyer. I wanted to do many things and I frequently wanted to quit. And in the grand scheme of things, my PhD wasn't even going badly. Okay. So that kind of crisis in a PhD is completely normal, which is why you have to be very sure and you have to have a sense of, why do I want to do this PhD? Okay. So let's now assume that I have not been able to convince you and you still want to do your PhD. Okay. So the thing to think about is, how do I reach out to supervisors? Now, don't do what I did, is the first piece of advice I have, which is I wrote to all sorts of random people and I wrote a very badly worded email. And one person replied, luckily. That's the PhD I ended up doing. This is not a good way to do it. So, what you have to do is, first of all, you might be thinking, how do I know who to do a PhD with? Okay. So, how do I approach? One good thing to do is to think about what field you want to apply in and look at the articles or whatever, who are the main people in that field. When you read the articles, who else do they cite? Who is there in the footnotes? Look people up. Look at which universities they are in, where are they based. Are they, so if they are junior assistant professors, then they may not be able to uh, supervise PhDs. Are they tenured professors? So are they full professor or associate professor? Do they supervise PhDs? Have they supervised people before? And how many? Can you find out about their previous students? Can you even reach out to their previous students? Okay. I say all of this for two reasons. One is that I frequently get emails from students, not usually from India, actually, from around the world, asking me to supervise random PhDs. You heard what I work on, right? I work on refugees, borders, citizenship, whatever. I got an email last week from some guy in Sweden wanting to work on some nuclear policy, something. Now, I'm sure it's a great PhD, but like, why are you writing to me? Right? So you have to write to people who have a realistic chance of supervising that PhD. That's the first thing. The second reason why choosing the PhD supervisor is so important, I think again Arvind will support me on this, is that in the PhD, you are set up, you are sort of on your own, and that's why it's such a lonely journey. So because you are on your own, that choice of supervisor is super important. Okay, who you have as your guide, who is your PhD supervisor, is really, really important. And it's important to hear what other people are saying about them. Like, does this person have a good reputation? Do you know if they're old PhD students, have they got jobs? Right. So really do quite a good internet search, or if you can speak to other people, because that information is valuable. You are going to have a very close relationship with that person, and to some extent that person can make or break your academic career. So choosing the right PhD supervisor is really important. So the takeaway from this is that don't just choose some big name, or don't just write to big names. Write to people across the world. If you're interested in a PhD, look at people in Australia, Canada, India, the UK, US, Europe. Look everywhere and look at who this person is and whether you think you'll be able to work with this person. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to tell you a little bit about what you should write in that first email. And what I will do when I finish talking, and maybe when Arvind's talking, is I will type out the text of what I think people should write, maybe in the chat box somewhere. But basically, it needs to be a very short email. This is your first reaching out. Okay, so you should write, dear professor or doctor, whatever. I would like to apply for a PhD in X department at Y university. I am interested in working on the topic. I was wondering if you would be willing to supervise this work. I will also be looking for funding from, you can name what bodies you're looking for funding from. I am attaching these things, and I'll talk about what you should attach in that first email. That's it. And your name. Okay, so it's, dear Professor so and so, I would like to apply for a PhD in this department at this university. I'm interested in working on this. I would also be applying for funding from here. I'm attaching these documents. I'm wondering if you will be interested in supervising this work. That's it. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be 3 paragraphs long. Okay, that's just it. Now, if you are emailing lots of people, make sure you have the name correct, the name of the department, the name of the university, those small things you are. Make sure you do that. Okay. Now, what should you attach with that letter? In that first, when you're reaching out, you should attach a simple copy of your CV. Now, in your CV, do not include details of what they want to know. Is they want to know, can this person do some independent research on their own, or will I have to teach them everything from scratch? Okay, from the beginning. So they want to see that you have, maybe at MPhil level or even master's level, whatever degree you've done some independent original research. What you don't want on your CV is ki class 6 mein I got this gold medal or whatever. They don't care about that. They care about, okay, I did my undergraduate degree. If you have a master's, then what is your master's? What topic did you work on? And if you have any experience of research experience, that's all they're interested in. It's a short CV. If you published anything, then that. So a short CV, a writing sample, you don't have to send the writing sample with the first email. You can send it with the second or third email. You can say, I can send you a writing sample if you need to. The writing sample should not be just any essay you've written in your university. Because all of us, and I did the same when I was studying in India, my essays were basically did not show any original research. So your writing sample has to show some, even if it's a little bit of original research, it has to show off some bit of it. So choose very wisely. Don't choose something that is just, just another essay. Okay, so take some time to think about what the writing sample is. And lastly, start thinking about the topic, the actual proposal. Okay. Now, why is this proposal so important? The proposal is important because When you first reach out to your supervisor, don't expect that your proposal will be perfect. It will not be perfect. Also, don't do stupid things like me. I wrote some proposal on one topic. I wanted to study Indian and Pakistani textbooks. I did a PhD on 1971 refugees. There was literally no link between these two things. But what I mean is, when you write a proposal, you're applying for funding or whatever, your advisor will also be willing to give you some feedback, okay, and say this is what you need to change. And when we are giving you that feedback, one of the things I'm looking for is this student able to make the changes I am asking them to make? Because that also tells me if they are ready to do a PhD or not. So if I say go and read this or think about this, then that's I'm saying that for a reason, because I want to see that happening. I want to see that you can do that, right? If you don't have access to those resources or the books, just tell your supervisor, look, I don't know how to do this, can you help me? It is better that someone tells me straight up front what they can and what they can't do, and I can help them, than you're sort of going off on your own and struggling. So once you have written to a supervisor and they have said, okay, I think, yes, you can apply, what happens behind the scenes? And this is where it is different in the US and the UK. Now, one of the things I will say to many of you in this room is that there is a lot more money in the US for PhDs than there is in the UK. What happens behind the scene in the US is a bit different from what happens in the UK. So after you have your guide has said yes, in the US, that person may have said yes to 5 students that year. He will take his list of 5 students and sit down in a meeting with everybody else in his department. And maybe that year they are going to give 15 PhD scholarships. He will then have to fight for his students. He is not going to get all 5. So he may say, I think so. But in the end, you may not get admission because you did not make that 15% cut. And whether you make that cut depends on if you are the strongest of your guides, candidates going forward. If your guide has had, say, 3 PhD students every year for the last 5 years, someone might say, listen, you have enough PhD students, give somebody else a chance, right? So luck also plays a lot of role in this. But he is basically sitting there, he or she, arguing with everybody else in their department for his PhD students. Okay? In the UK, it's a bit different. In the UK, if someone says, I'm willing to supervise you and supports you in making that application, stronger, you will probably get admission. But whether you will get funding or not, that is much more problematic. In the US, for most PhDs, if you get in, there is some amount of funding that comes with it. Unfunded PhDs are very uncommon. In the UK, that is very, very common. We often admit people and we have no money to give them. And then we expect you to come up with the funding. And again, you have to work with the guide to make your proposal much better for that funding process. Okay. And the last thing I'll say before I shut up and I let it open to questions is this big question of how do I come up with a PhD topic? Okay. Now, and I say this to you, knowing that whatever topic you come up with, by the time you finish your PhD, it will look a bit different. Like it won't be exactly the same. Okay. All PhDs change. But in the past, I've had people coming up to me, I'll give you examples and saying, I want to work on partition. Okay. But what does that mean? There's so much work on partition. What do you want to work on? They'll say, okay, I want to work on refugees. Okay, but there's like 20,000 books on partition refugees. What aspect of it do you want to work on? Okay. And what we are looking for is we are looking for some puzzle or some question that has not been answered. Right. And we are looking for somebody who is able to, who is interested in that, but also knows how they can do it. So if you look at Arvind's PhD, which I've had the pleasure of reading, Arvind had a very specific research question he was looking at. But most importantly for Arvind, he knew how to operationalize that PhD. What I mean is, he knew what he had to do in terms of the actual work to get it written. Right? So he knew, okay, here are the places I'm going to go to. This is what I'm going to do. So he had some idea of how that PhD was going to happen. If you can have some idea of that, that will also make your PhD a bit stronger. On that note, I will now stop talking and I will take all your questions, and Arvind can help me as well.
Devis? I
Hello.
think.
Yeah.
So just I want to share a few things before we can take question, Antara, if you have time. Elsewhere, we can like take questions for you and then I can go ahead. Hello?
Yes. Yes.
You are
Go
not,
ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm going to type out in the chat the template of the email
Yeah.
that people
Yeah,
can
that,
send
that
in.
would be great. That would be great. Thank you, Antara, for giving a wonderful presentation. And thank you, Eklavya team, particularly RajuKendre and Bharati. They have been long requesting to organize this session. So, as Antara said, just I would like to add few things from my experience in doing PhD in UK, as well as little bit experience which I had in JNU. And another important thing which I would like to add, which would be more relevant, because like I frequently come across students, meet student and resolve their problem, not only in India but also here in UK. That is how I came in contact with Raju. Particularly students coming from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and these marginalized communities background, which who are doing PhD and who are facing different kind of problem. So first thing which I would like to say, that if you want to pursue PhD, before like actually jumping in doing PhD, you should be mentally prepared. And when I am saying you have to be prepared mentally, I mean that there are certain issues which students frequently face, and I have witnessed several students who came here, and I kept reminding them like, do this thing before coming here, and or do those things. They didn't do that and just came. After 1 year or 1.5 years, some of them have to leave and go back. Of course, they had their own problem. So here, like first, like mental, which are like, when I am saying mental preparedness, you should be ready with some hard facts which you have to remember in your life. Of course, we know that while pursuing PhD, you are going to face loneliness, which is one very important thing Antara has pointed out. But also, you must know that you may face quite lot of financial problem. And even though if you are like students, mostly students are coming here in UK from Government of India fund, National Overseas Scholarship, Maharashtra government fund, and Madhya Pradesh government fund. All these funds, several students are joining PhD here. But big problem which you might face is that sometimes like that money would be coming, sometimes it would not be coming, and you will face financial problem. So you have to be mentally prepared. So for example, like, it can happen. There is one student currently who is pursuing PhD. I know that his scholarship has to be extended for 1 year, and since last 6 months that student has stopped writing everything, and and he is fearful of unexpected outcome which might come in upcoming like 6 months. What if government does not renew my scholarship, extend my scholarship for 1 year? These kind of problems, like all the problems which I am sharing with you, like, you might not end up with like all problems which you might face, but few problems which you can face, and you should be ready with that. And then also, like, you should also be ready, because the person with whom you are joining PhD, you do not know that how that person is, or what is his or her behavior, several other things. So one unexpected thing which you might face is that problem with your supervisor. As Antara rightly pointed out, that you should know that whether person has previously supervised or not. So for example, when I was choosing my supervisor recently, I have written my experience on for PSA Political Studies Association, and I have just simply written why I chose amongst two person, why I chose one particular supervisor. And reason was very simple, that this person was frequently responding my mail. So if I send mail in morning, by evening I was having a response. Another person was not responding for 1 week. So this gave me a sense, like, this can be every person's, like, criteria might be different, but this was my way of evaluation. Okay, this person would be good, and I am happy that my relation went very very well with that person. And then also, you must be ready with another hard fact, that you might face problem with institution. So sometimes, like, you can have issue with your institution which you are going to pursue PhD, and there is no ideal institution in the world. So so these are like some practical issues. And then there are some another two issues which I would like to share, is that you should not expect that PhD is like noodle and Maggie, which you will be done in 2 year or 1 year. It is just like what we say master degree, where which you can finish in given span of time. It can take 3 year, it can take 4 year, it can take 5 year. Even in UK, you might be at the end of examination, your viva you can be given for revise and resubmit and reappear for interview. These kind of issues I am witnessing with my colleagues and friends. So you have to be ready with this hard fact, that okay, PhD is gonna to take time, and if something is gonna to take time, so your task should be like, you have to finish small work which you have to do. uh, and then you should be also mentally prepared, particularly students coming from first generation must be ready with the social and mental pressure which you are going to face from your family, or your relatives, and society as a whole. Means you would have come across these ever since, like, for example, when 8 February incident happened in JNU. After that, when you visit social media, anything happened in JNU, लोग कहते हैं अरे अरे बूढ़े बूढ़े लोग बुजुर्ग हो गए तब तक जो है पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं. So these kind of problems, like, you would face in your family and friends, which people will say that okay, कब तक पढ़ेंगे, लग रहा है बुजुर्ग हो जाएंगे तब तक पढ़ते रहेंगे. All these kind of, like, real conversation uh, you will have, and these conversations can be demotivating for you, and you have to be mentally ready for, like, for facing these issues you are going to face in upcoming future. So this is one issue. And as Antara rightly pointed out about, like, finding supervisor, but before finding supervisor, you have to prepare yourself for my experiences of UK. So I would mostly share my experience which I had with UK. So you should be prepared. One preparedness should be with the topic. And my seniors have advised me, which I think, which now I find, like, very important, uh, what I should look into PhD, is that never look for event-based PhD thesis, writing PhD thesis. That is not considered to be a good thesis. And particularly my research also was like event-based. And then after 1 year, I molded it. And when I came to know that, okay, these are the lacunas, which this would be problem with my research. And then I remolded the thesis and make it a general theory oriented thesis. So you have to look around theme, larger theme in which you are going to do PhD, rather than like particular event. For example, you cannot do PhD on 2024 general election. This is not considered to be a good way of going for PhD, but rather than looking into a particular theme, like I work on candidate selection, that is a theme in comparative politics. Antara works on refugee. So you have to look into larger theme, and then accordingly you can look into the literature, what is written there, what is debate going on there, what kind of data is available, and several other things where gap lies. So these are larger issues, some of the issues which you can think of. And then in preparedness, of course, one issue is topic, finding about the topic, and second is like whether you have some kind of training or some kind of inclination or some exposure to that topic. Anyone can say ki I want to work on affirmative action policies or anything. Means all these are ready-made things. Means you can say that. But as a supervisor, when my supervisor chose me, so he looked in my CV and have gone through what kind of trainings I have taken. And I had taken training in quantitative methods. So several trainings I had taken. So he even told me that these are the important thing which I looked in your CV during my interview. So you have to be prepared. So not only selecting theme is important, but also finding about like having at least some exposure, some kind of training, little bit training you should have. So in those trainings, like institutions, these are Eklavya and different other institutions in India, they are providing some kind of training. So for example, I will just give you an example. When I was in JNU, I used to surprise, okay, how people are frequently from my department frequently getting admission in Oxford. There was one particular department, and Sussex University. And later on, at much later stage, when I came here, then I discovered that okay, they were doing some kind of internship with CPR. And similarly, those who are working in election, they were having some affiliation with the Lokniti team, all these issues. So you have to little bit like conscious about what are institutions where you can get little bit experience and all these things. As Antara was saying, that when supervisors had to think that whether this person would be able to do, whether it would be able to finish PhD or not able to finish PhD. So these things comes only with your experience, like whether you have done some kind of primary work or not. And for completing PhD, even that is important thing, particularly in UK. If you have done some kind of previous work, at least you would be aware about the literature, you would be aware about the problems which you might encounter, instead of like you started working and after 1 year you faced some different kind of problem, which like few students are facing those kind of problems which they have here. So these are like few issues which I wanted to share, and would like to welcome the questions which you will have, and if anything comes, we can go on. Go ahead.
I've been answering some questions in the chat in the meanwhile. A lot of the questions are about writing samples. Now, I don't know whether, certainly for US PhD programs, writing samples are a must. I don't know whether in the UK we often need them so much or not. What they do is they show your supervisor, okay, this he can do a little bit of writing, right?
Yeah.
The writing sample, somebody said, it can be previously published work, absolutely. We just need to know, like, can this person do a little bit of research, even if it's a small bit of research of their own? Have they been able to do something of their own, right? That's all. And there's no such it's not a word limit or anything in the writing sample. But the main thing is, I think Arvind is absolutely right in that when you think of the topic, you have to think thematically, and you have to think, okay, if I'm interested in candidate selection, then I'm not going to be able to do every state in India. Which states am I interested in, right? How am I going to do it? If I can say to my advisor, I've either gone and done some work in this field already, or I have some connection, I know some people there who can help me. That will also make your application stronger, right? Because, this is one of the problems, the UK PhD is very short. See, in the US, you do 2 years of coursework. And so you have some time to, this is what I did, completely change my PhD topic and start from scratch. But in the UK, because you have very short period of time, you have to, from day one, you have to keep going, right? There is the settling in period is non-existent. And I think, when Arvind was saying it can take however long it takes, this is part of the problem, that we don't really have time to settle in, but everybody needs time to settle in to a PhD. I will give you an example. My husband is a scientist, but his training was in medicine. And as you know, doctors in India have no scientific training, right? They don't actually do any science. So when he first joined a lab, and he joined a lab in a very prestigious place at Oxford, he didn't know how to use a pipette properly. And he said it was so embarrassing. And his advisor gave him a book that was 600 pages long on protocols of the lab and said, go read it. Come back next weekend with the whole thing having been read, because you don't know how to do anything in this lab. Okay. Now the thing is, either you can become very, like, really depressed, right? That I just don't fit in, or you can, you have to find other ways of, it's not, you won't learn everything in 1 week, right? That is why you have to reach out to other people and look for other sources of support to, see what you can learn. And that's why, like Arvind said, having some training beforehand really does help.
Prior knowledge, yeah. At least I know, like recently I met a Indian student who is good friend, and it is his third year of PhD, and he have just written to like 15,000 words, and nothing more than that, and he is unable to proceed, and like frequently visiting me after like every 3 months, and conversation ends at the same level, and he has ended up on two problems he is facing. One problem he is facing is supervisor, frequent change of supervisor has left, gone somewhere in other university. Second problem, though, like, it is not matter of supervisor, so even though supervisor has left, but it is duty of the student to finish PhD. And in such situation, your like prior knowledge, prior reading can be very useful. So problem with that student, another problem is that student does not want to, like, he is thinking that, okay, I have some very big idea and I am going to do like groundbreaking work, and for doing that groundbreaking work you need to have, like, you need to read literature, find the gap, all, and it will take lot of time, guidance, everything. So instead of that, what knowledge you have already, you have, like, if you have read the literature, use that literature for, like, for your work, and you can proceed on that. So these kind of like problems, which are practical problem, which are like, which comes after once you join PhD. But the audience which we are addressing today is like those who are planning to join PhD. But of course, these are important things to know for you also, because it goes in this way. I know one student who has done work on who has done pre initial work in food politics, and looking into doing like analysis, and then he expanded the idea thinking that okay, I will make it much broader, and then once again land up in same kind of problems. So that's why it is important when you are choosing the topic, you must know that whether for doing the PhD topic which I am choosing or theme which I am choosing, whether I have read some literature, whether I have gained little bit methodological training or not. These are important aspect which you must, like, you should know. There was a student like way back 2 years ago. There is one very good student, and he has good resource in India, and I advised him that okay, on my advice he has applied for a PhD. He wanted to do PhD in foreign university. I told him that okay, if you want to do PhD in foreign university, because I have gone through his writing and other stuff, I suggested that you should apply in 1 year I, IIPS program, Master in Public Policy. They give you good training in research method, and later on that can be useful for you. He got selection, but later abandoned the admission. Now after 2 years, the student is once again in communication with me and said that भैया 2 साल पहले जो कहे वो ठीक, वो अगर मैं किया होता तो जो है much ahead गया हो. So you need to do like preparation, what I am saying, before like thinking that okay, immediately I am gonna to apply. You need to do preparation, and those preparation are reading literature, getting like some sort of training, and looking into initial works, whether that is feasible or not. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. One person have a question, I think. Shravya. Yeah. Shravya, please
Yeah,
unmute.
sorry, I was just about to type it too. But my question is that, like, let's say I've accepted a PhD for 3 years in the UK with funding, and then, like, I know for a fact I can't finish it in 3 years. So, can I expect to like find other funding sources should it go beyond like 3 years? Like, what's the probability that like I'll be able to get additional funding?
It's hard in the current climate, Shravya. I wish I could tell you that there is money available, but I won't lie and say that because it is hard. And a lot again will depend on your supervisor and their ability. So if they are on a grant or something, they can help you a little bit. Yeah. And I think this actually goes back to the question that Arvind is saying, that particularly in the UK, because that PhD is so short, you really do have to come in well prepared to try and do it in that 3 years, or say 3.5 years if possible. See, my PhD took 6 years and I had funding for all of it, but I was in the US, right? I still taught. So I did 2 years of training, so coursework. Then I did 1 year of teaching, by which time I had done all of my secondary reading. Then I did 1 year of field work, and then I wrote for a year and a half. Okay. And the year and a half, so I was funded all the way up to 5 years. And my extra 6th year, I got what they call a writing fellowship. And actually, no, I finished in 6 years. On paper, I had actually finished in 5.5, but I had not found a job. So the day I submitted my PhD, I would lose my funding. So I physically held on to the final submission till I got my job at Royal Holloway, and then I pressed submit on this PhD, because like, what was I going to eat? So I had 6 months of extra writing time. I had finished. I sat on my PhD. Okay. Yeah. So hope that answers your question, Shravya. It's not guaranteed, but that's the kind of conversation you have with your advisor. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, Antara, just I wanted to add one thing. Yeah. So here in UK, like one good thing is that till 3 years, you are supposed to pay your tuition fee. And in last year, 4th year, you are not supposed to pay tuition fee, just only writing fee, which is nominal, like below £1,000 in every university. So fourth year, like PhD goes in fourth year, but even more than fourth year, like I submitted in 4.5 years. But in like after 3 years, you are not supposed to pay tuition fee, which is very nominal fee. You have to manage only amount for living here. And usually like PhD students in fourth year try to do manage that thing with taking some part-time teaching assignment, of course, but you cannot be sure that you will get some teaching assignment. But in fourth year onward, you after 33 year, you need to find money only for sustaining yourself, and that people usually do with uh, teaching assignment and other kind of part-time jobs. Yes.
Thank you. That helps.
There's a question on how to find a research gap. This was actually a multi-million-dollar question. So how to find a research gap? I think you have to think differently. You have to, it's a research gap is not that big. A research gap is that big. Okay. And that is why Arvind was saying think thematically. And I think somebody else, Rahul, had a question about, can I do a PhD on the recent overhaul of criminal laws in terms of extended police custody, which will affect police? That's a chapter.
Yes.
That's a PhD.
That's
Okay.
not it.
So what we mean by that is that you first find the area that you're interested in, then you find something in that area that you're interested in. Okay. And you read as much as possible, and you try and find a puzzle or something that you want to solve in that area. So I'll give you an example. We were talking about partition of India. So somebody might want to say, I want to look at what the Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS was doing during that time. But chalo, actually there is already work on that, right? But then they might say, I want to look at what grassroots level Hindu and Muslim organizations were doing. Now, why do you want to study that? What is, because every time you come up with a research topic, and I do this to this day, I ask this to myself, somebody taught me this, always ask yourself, so what? If you had to explain to somebody who has zero interest in your PhD, why they should spend 5 minutes listening to you, okay, then you always have to answer, so what? So the so what to that question is, I want to study how grassroots organizations can have an impact, say, on violence or riots or whatever, or distribution of aid or whatever that is, right? And this is what I'm going to use to look at it, at least to start with, and then you see where your PhD takes you, right? So there is a big question, and then there is a smaller question. Okay.
Yeah, and in more practical term, if you are thinking like research gap, if I have to think in research gap, I look in this way that, okay, which is generally like whether there is gap in theory, existing theory, which is very difficult to find out gap in existing theory. Second gap, which you can look into whether there is gap in terms of methodological gap, the way research has been conducted. For example, in my discipline, in political science, I often say that in India, political science is nothing but history. Like there is no difference between political science and history. So if you are sitting in history department, they will also teach you Gandhi, Ambedkar, Savarkar. If you are you are sitting in political science classroom, they will teach you Gandhi, Ambedkar, Savarkar, and that's all. Like discipline has collapsed, not only collapsed but also overlapped because of these things. But if you have to think in terms of like, okay, what is method, this is probably one reason is because of the methodology, dominance of historical method. Of course you will come later on, but if you will look recent contributions which people have made, for example, Francesca Argensenius, Jill Verniers, they have brought up new kind of data. So you can think of, okay, whether my research is going to make some kind of new contribution, not even if not in terms of theory, but in terms of data. So we call here like low hanging fruit, but that's a very important thing if you are able to find out gap in terms of data. For example, recently I was advising one students who is looking for PhD and will join. So we just looked. Whatever had been work on Indian Parliament, there is hardly any research on Rajya Sabha. And everyone has written, like from Valerian Rodriguez to other, those who are working in this field, there is one constant criticism that, okay, Rajya Sabha had not been worked properly. So that's one kind of gap which we can think of. So whether there is any empirical gap in terms of the data, with your data, with taking particular kind of work, you can come up with this certain amount of data which can be useful for other researcher or in discipline. So these are like some ways through which in generally we try to find the gap and showcase our research that, okay, we are going to make this contribution. But again, like my research uses method approach, so like contribution which the way I think largely from like approach of quantitative method. And my suggestion would be from that perspective. But those who extensively follow qualitative method, they will have some like another mode of thinking. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. One, to follow up on Shravya's. Look, whatever program you apply to US, UK, you have to reach out to the advisor, because the difference between an undergraduate and a PhD is that in an undergraduate or whatever, you are applying to a department. Doesn't matter who is going to actually teach you, right? But a PhD is very advisor dependent. You're not applying to the department. You're applying to one person. So you can apply to the department, but if the person in that department who would normally supervise you says no, then actually you won't get into that department because there's no one to supervise you. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit different. Like if you apply, I'll give you an example. If you apply at the moment to say Royal Holloway and you want to work on I don't know, CA, NRC, okay, and you haven't reached out to me, right? You apply, you put some generic application in. That application is going to come straight to me because it is most likely that I will be asked to either be first or second supervisor on the project. Most likely first. At that point, if I don't know you and I say no to you, the department can't take you. Who's going to supervise you? Right? So the picking of the supervisor and getting a sort of a nod from the supervisor saying yes is very important. Right? The other one is on tribal issues specific to Madhya Pradesh. Absolutely. There are, listen, I mean, one of the things I will say is that there particularly, you know, my immediate thought was somewhere like Sussex would be interested, but a lot of anthropology departments, for instance, would be very interested in tribal issues. What they will expect you to do when you study tribal issues in Madhya Pradesh is be able to situate it again. You know, this is what Arvind was saying, in the bigger context. Tribal issues in Madhya Pradesh are a reflection of this big conversation happening around indigenous communities, their relationship to land, their relationship to rights. So you will be expected to know that literature, say maybe in relation to Canada or Australia or, you know, Native Americans, right? So they will expect that you will know, and then your specific work can very much be in Madhya Pradesh, but they will expect that you are making, that through that work, you are making some contribution to the bigger field. Does that make sense? Come on.
Right, ma'am. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there is one question on MPhil. I think like MPhil, you have usually Indian students have this misunderstanding. MPhil is just like another master degree. So you are not supposed to find a supervisor for pursuing MPhil here. It is equal to MA and MA degree. And I think in Cambridge and Oxford, they do not offer, I don't think they offer MA degree, but they just give MPhil degree. So it is different name for master degree, but it has component which is research oriented. So if you are like pursuing, it is assumed that if you are taking MPhil degree here, you will go for research work. So that's the thing. You are not supposed to find out And then, yeah, Antara was absolutely right about when the student said that someone asked question about Madhya Pradesh tribal. This is another big problem. The way this is problem with particularly with Indian students with whom who contact with us about like who share plan about pursuing PhD. Largely you think in this way that okay, I am gonna to work on tribals of Madhya Pradesh. No, that's not the larger issue. You have to find out larger issues. So for example, larger issue is indigenous right or environmentalism. Recently one good scholar, my friend Dr. Viku Rathore, who works on tribals, so he has just looked into the change of environment on tribals, or for example like some larger global conversation, as Antara said, larger global conversation. You have to look into what is going on, and then thereafter you can say that okay, I will look into this debate through my case study of particular tribal XYZ tribal in Madhya Pradesh. That is how you approach for PhD. So but you cannot say that okay, I want to do PhD on a tribal XYZ tribal community in Madhya Pradesh. No, that's not the case. Like for example, I look, my research is, my case study is on Uttar Pradesh. So I do not say that I am researcher of Uttar Pradesh. I say that I look on candidate selection of political parties, and my case study is Uttar Pradesh. Not like case study can be anything. So in same way you have to think, and others who are also planning to do PhD, you have to think with the larger conversation. One way of looking, one good way of looking into larger conversation is look into the millennium development goals which have been set by United Nations, and the case which you have in your mind, try to it with that, and that might help you to map your idea that okay, my research goes in this large, this broader theme, and probably like you would be able to link with a larger theoretical framework or larger theme in which you want to pursue your PhD. Okay, any other particular question which you came across?
I think I've answered everything in the chat I have come across, more or less. If
Yes,
anybody,
there were another question which is about getting admission in Oxford and low marks, something
it's
CR.
the same, it's the part of the same MPhil chat. That is the same set of questions. So if you follow
Okay,
down.
yeah. So yeah, this is another good like question. Mostly when I like when people inquire from India like for doing PhD, in their mind only three institutions comes in their mind. It is Oxford, Cambridge, and LSE. And you have to like think beyond. It is not necessary that you have to think for PhD. You have to think that okay, which person is better, which supervisor is better for me. I could have taken admission, for example, in other university, but what if I would not have completed PhD? So that is more important. Like for PhD, institution should not be primary. Primary goal should be the supervisor with whom you are going to work, whether that person knows your topic or is gonna to help you properly. That is more important rather than like landing up looking into like running for institution, which is often one case in Indian students. I have heard quite a lot of stories that to my professors also, they share a story how they join X university there, and after 2 years they have to abandon the course and start fresh in some other department with other person. So you should, your goal should be like, your target should be, you should think from the perspective of supervisor, not from the perspective of institution. So that
I can answer a little bit of some of the questions on US PhDs. So
Yes.
US PhDs, the one of the things about US PhDs is that they do come with funding. They, however, also come with some severe visa restrictions on what work you can do. Okay. So in my case, I could teach on campus, but I could only teach 20 hours a week, which I think is actually also the case in the UK. You can work for 20 hours a week, I think, on your student visa. But I could teach only 20 hours a week. But the person who offered me a TA ship, that teaching came to be 21 hours a week. So either I was getting 0 or I was getting 21. And the reason she had never considered this before is because she had never had an international student teach for her before. So this had never come up for her. She had only ever had Americans teach for her. And one of the things I found in America is that they're incredibly not like awake to the problems that international students have, right? It's their PhD programs are full of Americans. And so in the UK, you will find that people understand, I suppose, because immigration is talked about so much, that they understand that it's quite like life is difficult. Whereas in the US, they think, but you've come to the US, life is great. What are you complaining about? Right? And so there's just, and so when I told this professor, listen, I can't teach for you. Then the department was like, well, but who are you going to teach for? And I kept saying that, like, how is this my problem? Like, you guys admitted me to the program. You have said you will give me teaching. Now you're telling me that it's 21 hours, which will mean in breaking the law and I can get deported, or 0. Like what? Anyway, they found some loophole where I taught for 20 hours and that 1 hour was counted as something, I don't know, something they did. But it was the fact that they seemed so surprised. I'm like, but you guys have had international students for years. You're one of the biggest universities. Why are you so surprised? Right? So that I think is one thing. The other thing I think, to answer this question about what happens after PhDs. Okay. So look, what happens after PhDs, that answer would have been different 10 years ago to now. One of the biggest problems, what happens after PhDs, is that in the PhD, you are trained to do research. When you go on the job market, they're actually also looking at your teaching skills. Okay. But many people will not get a lot of training in teaching. We're not trained teachers, right? We're trained researchers. Suddenly, when you're looking for jobs, there's a whole different skill set that you're being tested on. I find that totally absurd, by the way. I also find it vaguely absurd that in my day-to-day job, the thing I get paid for is to teach undergraduates. That is not, by the way, what I was trained in. I have no actual teacher training qualification, right? But that is what my salary comes in for, mostly, right? The research is like one part of it, but 40% of my salary is supposed to be from teaching. But I mean, I have taken courses in teaching because you have to when you're at Royal Holloway, but I don't actually have a degree in teaching. So one of the things that's very important when you do a PhD is to get some experience, because that will make your CV a lot stronger. How difficult is it to get academic jobs? It's, as Arvind will tell you, extremely difficult. The market is very difficult. And again, here there are differences between the US and the UK. So in the US, you get a visa for 1 year when you finish, or 9 months, that's the OTP. When it runs out, if you haven't got a job, you have to come back. So that's quite difficult. In the UK, the visa system seems to change every 6 months. You often end up spending thousands of pounds trying to renew your visa to stay on. Again, I'm sure Arvind will talk length about this. So, those are some of the, it's not that when I've got my PhD in my hand, that is the end of the process. Oh, now I can apply for jobs, right? You are applying for jobs before you finish your PhD, but some people will not consider you if you don't have the PhD in hand. But as soon as you have the PhD in hand, you switch visa statuses very quickly. So it's a bit of a mess. I moved, so I never got my OPT in the US because I had moved to the UK. So I was spared that, but I had to get a UK work visa, and that was one of the most stressful things I've ever done. And then I had to get it renewed. That was even more stressful. And my college offered zero money towards it and zero support. Okay. And to this day, I am actually I now actually have a British passport. I have never ever thrown out a single piece of paperwork. There's a full cupboard in my house full of my husband and my bank statements for no actual reason. But I still live in fear that someday somebody will ask me to produce one piece of paper that July 2018, where did you get your salary? Okay, I throw nothing out because I still live in fear that I will need a visa for something for somewhere. Okay. How to acquire teaching skills? Some PhD programs will make you teach. In our department, we offer some teaching. We also offer, Arvind, you did Capital or Instill or whatever it's called now. Yeah,
Both.
both. Yeah, there's like a teacher training thing that you can do on the side. Australian universities, I don't know very much. I do know that there is Australia is always looking for people, but Australia is also very far away, huh? We often think that Australia is not so far away. I was actually looking for complicated reasons. I was looking at Australia the other day, and I realized that actually it is like literally by flight further from Calcutta than London is. you know, just because it is to the east, it is actually not that much closer. These are important factors. During my PhD, I rarely went home because I did not have the money to go home. But also sometimes what happens is if you don't go home, especially in the winter breaks, you become very lonely. You're the only person around. Sometimes I was the only person in the library. Everybody goes home to their family, right? So, the question of distance and the question of coming back and forth, those are also like important things you should think about. The one thing I do know about Australian universities is when you finish, I think they have at least they used to have a more flexible visa regime than the UK or the US, in terms of finding work. I don't know if that's still the case. Don't take my word for it, but they used to for sure. They were less hostile.
Yeah. So, like as Antara has responded several questions here in UK PhD, like in PhD, teaching is embedded in PhD. So, for example, you would be provided some skill teaching training. So, in Royal Holloway and in all more or less all universities, that is like you are provided some opportunity to get scope of like get teacher teacher training. Usually, like it depends on students. I know several students who joined PhD, they did not do like till 4 years, thinking that okay, next year karenge. Then next year they thought that okay, next year hum karenge, and finally some of them have landed up doing no training in teaching. But point is that is embedded in this part. Australian issue I do not know, but once again there are like few more. Once again people came up with the question on topic and event. Just one good example I will give you. Another example probably from different uh, different scope. I will give you example. For example, if you are thinking, if you will approach me and ask me that okay, I want to do PhD on farmers law, I will not suggest you, like, because for me that is an event. There was like it has happened and then it was withdrawn and gone. But instead of that, I will say that okay, you have to think in this way. So if you are thinking, then this issue can be looked into three larger theoretical perspective. One, it can be looked into whole agrarian movement. That's one way of looking it. Another way, and resistance from farmers. And another way, it can be looked into the reform in agrarian sector. That's another good topic. And then you can look into this issue from like tracing since last 50, 60 years. And then you can look into the same issue. You can look into from like perspective of environmental crisis, or reforms in agrarian law, reforms in agrarian system. And then you can probably you can think through the farmers resistance, which is another like a global theoretical debate. So when you are thinking topics, you have to think in larger contribution where you can compare with other countries, and all these aspects you have to look into, and rather than like looking into particular event, because event is gone and then you will land up in some problem. By the time you come up a certain point, something new will happen, and that will overshadow the issue which you have started working, and you will start thinking that, oh, what I am working is not relevant at all, no one is listening my story. So for example, if I would have thought that, okay, in 2019, the way I started in 2019 election looking into candidate selection, and then one good friend who has done PhD, he consistently, like in conversation, said that, look, you guys have to look PhD in larger theme rather than event center. And his advice went absolutely right, because by the time I have submitted PhD, if I have said that, okay, 2019 election, now election is 2024, and my story is gone. Like no one is interested in what happened in 2019 or 2024. So that is why, like, you have to look from this perspective. What is larger theme which you are looking? This is big problem actually with the students from like marginalized communities. They have this specific problem. I have interacted like at least 400 500 students I have interacted in last 4 5 years through personal conversation and all these things. Sometimes even like means I, I come up very heavily on them because they are unable to move beyond this issue, looking into a larger thematic concern. So you have to think in this way. And when you are looking like larger PhD funding and another other aspects, so one way, like one practical advice would be, sometimes here in UK universities offer PhD with, they call graduate teaching assistant. So you are given PhD position. So along with that, certain teaching would be embedded. Probably like I am just sending you a link. You can look into that.
Arvind, maybe it will be helpful to actually talk through some practical example. I'll actually give Arvind as an example. So I've read Arvind's entire PhD. So when I read Arvind's entire PhD, I did a mock viva basically, right?
Yes.
So when I read Arvind's PhD, the first question I read it with, and this is at the end of the process, the first question I asked myself was, is this guy going to pass or not? Okay, is this a pass-worthy PhD or not? So then I was like, okay, he's going to pass. He has to do some things to, I have some things I want to say to him and things to fix. But PhD will pass, right? Now I want Arvind to show off. He knows this because I told him this. I need him to show off his work in a particular manner so he passed. But I have also read PhDs where I've read it and gone, actually, this PhD is a long way from passing. Okay. And that gap happens again, usually when students come in without the correct training, because it is very hard to make that up during the PhD. Right. So then once I have decided, look, Arvind's going to pass. So now I'm going to give him, my job is to help him before he faces his examiners. Okay. And how he can make his PhD better. That is a very different thing from where I was not Arvind's advisor, just to clarify this, right? I'm reading it as an external party. So then my job is to help him get over that last jump, right? But if I have somebody who's, so, and I have had this before, actually, a student who quit. And she quit because she was very good at data collecting. Her data collecting was incredible, but she was unable to make that jump between describing her data and analyzing that data. That is that big picture jump that Arvind is talking about. What I don't need you to do is I don't need you to tell me what you found. I need you to tell me why what you have found, and in whatever field that is, science, humanities, social sciences, whatever it is you have found, what is the significance of that finding? And that jump only you can make. Your guide will not do that jump for you. Nobody else will make that jump for you. People might give you some suggestions. People might sort of make some broad suggestions, but that jump, and you have to show that jump in your writing, right? In your actual physical writing of the PhD. That jump some people are unable to make. And that's fine. Listen, like, there is a reason the PhD is the process it is. Okay. And it's fine to say, listen, maybe it's not for me. And that's why I started off by saying, be very clear in your head why you want to do the PhD. Because what the PhD is not, is it's not just collecting data or a set of facts or one small problem I have investigated. It's a multi-year process where you have to show. So someone like Arvind will have to show not only that he understands Indian politics broadly, Indian politics in a particular state, he understands candidate selection literature in general, that he can speak to candidate selection literature in general. So it's many steps to this process. Okay. Again, yeah. So I have a bunch of questions about the IELTS. I think, again, like Arvind said, you should have all these boxes ticked off before you start the process, as you know, as many as you can. Also, because
in PhD, just with IELTS, which, like, when I went through IELTS exam in India, and issue is that sometimes, like, this happens, like sometimes university might be asking 6.7 score and you have 6.5. For example, my score was in one particular area, it was little bit low. So few universities give exception that, okay, you just submit IELTS score. They will, even if they have asked that score should be 7, and if you have got, say, 6.5, they will say that, okay, we are accepting your we are accepting that score. Some universities do that, but I also know few universities, particularly one student who is, again, another close student of me, who joined in same batch when I started doing PhD. So he had applied in one UK university, appeared in IELTS, and got little bit less score. And he was awarded National Overseas Scholarship. And so I suggested him just submit IELTS score to university and see what uni says. So he wrote to the university. University categorically said that, no, we cannot accept 6.5 score. We just need 7. So my advice, and there were 2 students in same circumstances who already has Indian funding, but they have got same score. So one student, I advise him that, look, you should now, because it is not my biasness, but it comes through experience, because I have gone previously through that process, and I know that, okay, if I have not been able to score 7 or 7.5 score right now, in next 3 months, if I once again appear in IELTS, I would not be able to score 7. That this is a practical like thing. Another way is that, okay, I can resist कि हम तमाम चीजों को हम डिनाई कर देते हैं, हम उसको अपने यहाँ इन डिफरेंट लैंग्वेज कि we will keep appearing. So I have example of 2 students. So one, I suggested, look, Babu, you should try in some other universities where IELTS score is less. So for example, if you are not able to score 7 and UK universities are insisting that like score should be 7, I said you should look in some other university in UK, first thing, which is ready to accept, say, 6.5 score, or you should look European university where first language is not English, so they accept lower IELTS score. And so this advice was gone to 2 students. One student accepted this and he got admission in European university. Another student did not accept this advice, although one student who accepted this advice simultaneously appeared for second time in IELTS and scored same marks. But he was following another advice also of looking some other university, particularly European university, which is accepting a 6.5 score. And that advice worked for him. Another student did not like went for first route, reappearing, thinking that okay, I will reappear in exam and will score the marks. Did not try in different universities, particularly European university. Ended up scoring same marks, losing his scholarship. And though after like 1.5 years was unable to secure marks, and then followed same route which I have suggested. But of course, you are going to lose your time. So you should not be, there are certain theory, but also you should be practical with yourself, whether you are able to make this or you are not able to make this. So you should be strategic. So if you are not able to, so I know like there are several students who come across to saying that I am first generation learner, I have not gone proper training, I have not gone English medium school. No one is going to listen to all these things. You have to think, okay, all these things are the case. I cannot go in past and change my circumstances and like correct everything. Rather than doing that, you have to be look into finding out what are the strategies for doing next. So if you are not able to, as I said, you are not able to get admission in Cambridge University, try something different, other institute. If you are not able to find out UK, go for European universities. Look into those. If you have decided that okay, I am gonna to pursue PhD in foreign university, and in the end, like Indian university, we cannot like just deny that okay, PhD in Indian university totally bad at all or bogus at all. No, there are like very good institutions and good PhDs get produced. Your idea should be like, your perspective should be how to make improvement day by day. And like only like you cannot stop with one PhD, just your life doesn't stop. You have to keep continuously making improvement.
I think this is actually an important question, because some people are asking about European universities. So there are two things here. One, and this centers around English language proficiency. So I'm fairly obviously proficient in English. I mean, I read, speak, and write Hindi and Bengali fairly proficiently as well. But obviously, I can speak, read, and write English. And I grew up in a household where my father was an English professor. So I was very confident that when I came into the program, that I would be fine in terms of language skills. Okay. But if this is hard for you, then remember that it is exhausting to be reading academic literature and writing in a language that does not come naturally to you. Okay. That's not your fault. But remember that, when we started this chat, Arvind and I were talking about how it is a very lonely journey. It becomes even lonelier if you're having to write in a language that does not come so easily to you. It becomes even lonelier if you live in a country where the language is different. Now, most of you probably will be speaking enough English to be able to communicate quite easily. But if you're living, as I said, I think in one of the comments, you're living in Copenhagen or Paris or Berlin or Hamburg, okay, where you are writing in English, but everybody around you is speaking another language. Even if you're trying to learn that language, right, you will still feel very, very lonely, right? And so there is a reason why people from the same country often hang out together, right? Because you can be yourself, and you can, in that downtime, you can speak your own language and you can speak. So I'll give you an example. I have been learning French for many years, and I really do mean many years. At this point, my French is good enough that I can order food and I can read very fluently in French. Okay. Sometimes I have to look up a word or two, but my French reading is not bad. But if you put me into a party full of French people, I will be lost. I am not funny in French. I can't crack jokes in French. I can't tell stories in French, right? I will stand in one corner completely unable to join in. Okay. And this is on the back of having, on and off learned this language for 10 years. And why I learned this language is a very irritating reason. So don't even ask me this question. I can tell you the story, but it's a very irritating reason. But once I started learning, I decided to continue. So language is important. The language skill is important because it is not just about clearing the IELTS, but it is also about being able to read and write in that language, because you will be writing your PhD in English. And also because at some point, your social circle, all of this will depend on having, and your teaching will depend on you being able to communicate in English, right? And the lack of doing so, this is why, it does get lonely. And I mean, I will say very honestly, and I say this, to people who ask, I have various friend circles, but I also have like an Indian friend circle in the UK, right? And my Indian friend circle, when they come, we're not speaking English inside the house, right? Just like I don't have to tell them when they come into my house, ki, please take off your shoe. They'll take off their shoe. Or when I serve food, nobody asks ki, haath se khaye. I don't give them spoons also. I expect they will eat with their hand, right? But also I know that, we'll all speak either Hindi or Bengali to each other, right? And that, then when I finish that day I've spent with them, or half a day or whatever, then my sense of well-being is better at the end of that. I can go out and face the world again. I don't know what you think, Arvind, whether you agree with this.
Yeah, like I have been since very beginning. I also have two kind of friends. One is like Indian, and another, particularly I have three kind of people. One is like Indian friends who are PhD scholars and in research, and then also people of diaspora who like, and then those who are like my colleagues and others. But problem is like, that is one particular issue. But here what they are saying is that requirements which you need for
Exactly.
getting admission. And often, as I said, like you should, when you have got your IELTS score, you should communicate to your university. Look, I appeared in IELTS score and I have like received this much score. I have gone through. I will make improvement and all these things you should write. I have like last 4 5 year I have studied in English, and then I will make improvement in future and see whether they are ready to accept your low score or not. So usually it works. But in case like if some universities are very particular about that, they are not flexible enough, then you should try something else. So that's all. It's a very practical solution which I would offer. Okay. I don't think there any other query. Yeah, one last question. I have just shared a link. There are there are universities which here in UK offer graduate teaching assistant. In that, like PhD is embedded. So you get admission, you do PhD, and simultaneously you teach in that particular department. I have shared one link, and there are more similar kind of PhD opportunities. So they get advertised through graduate teaching assistant. You can look into, but in UK, for UK, you can look into the website called jobs.ac.uk, and there you can find out that kind of opportunities where PhD is interlinked. And second is that there are some professors or universities who get funding from big institutes, and in those fundings sometimes like PhD is interlinked with those fundings. For example, Antara, in our department, probably like we have funding on current situation of Muslim, probably West Asian department, which is offering 2 3 or 4 PhD. It will provide those who are studying topic but related to situations of Muslims. So that kind of like, it is called project based PhD. So sometimes like universities have that kind of funding. So they also come up with those kind of PhDs. How to get to know about these issues, that is another important aspect. And usually, like, how I know all these things, because I am communication officer of Political Studies Association's Early Career Network, and I run, like, there is a called PSA ECN network, which is a Twitter account and everything I run. So keep frequently retweeting that. So one way of looking into in all these areas is you join these kind of, like, when you are using social media, Twitter and other platform, try to follow these kind of networks, also professional bodies. These issues gets, like, these kind of opportunities gets advertised there. So you have to, like, through that you can get information. Like what I do, like, after certain point of time, when I see that, okay, I have very huge following, and on my Twitter I find that sometimes I am receiving only political news, and then I sit one day and just unfollow everyone from whose account frequently I am getting news, because reason is that because I need some other information, and those information are these academic jobs and PhD opportunities. These are important things. So try to make sure that, try to follow some, like, organizations, and there are Twitter handles which are jobs and PhD. All these are on social media. So once you will follow, you will see sometimes it gets advertised, and see your uh, it might happen that your area of interest, your area of research might be suitable for that person, and try to contact them. So that is another way how PhD works here. And first way we already talked. So that's all.
If anybody have last question, please ask. Otherwise, we will wrap up with the session. And बहुत अच्छा session था sir and ma'am. So मतलब जो भी doubts थे students के, कुछ भी मुझे लगता है कुछ भी छोटे मोटे doubts भी रहते थे, तो शायद आपने cover कर दिए हैं almost everything is there. So बहुत ही अच्छा session रहा. और प्लीज सर एक मेल अपना छोड़ देंगे तो कोई स्टूडेंट अप्रोच करना चाहता होगा.
हाँ, मुझे जो है, मतलब मैं लार्जली ट्विटर और ये सोशल मीडिया पर अवेलेबल रहता हूँ, और वहां से मुझे जो है, मैं सबको रिप्लाई करता हूँ, चाहे 2 दिन 3 दिन, बट रिप्लाई मैं सभी को करता हूँ. सो बेटर है कि वहाँ जो है कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं. बट मैं मेल भी लिख दे रहा हूँ अपना,
Yes.
which is always available. Usually mail is one
It's a
email with Antara's mail you can find on, like, Royal Holloway website, but
I
like,
also posted my email address.
but I might be moving somewhere else, so I have given my personal email address. Yes.
So thank you sir, thank you ma'am for the
Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
for having us.
session.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
one announcement is there for the mentees who want to apply for the PhD and wanted to pursue the PhD. So our mentorship program is going on. So please apply in that and get the mentor and.
Okay.
Thanks for the session.
Thank you, ma'am.